A very good morning to all the participants. I greet you all in Islamic way. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Meaning, may peace, mercy and blessings of the Almighty be upon all of us. We now commence the webinar by invoking the blessings of the Almighty with the recitation of few verses from the Holy Quran along with its translation. Surah Al-Alaq, verses 1 to 5. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم Translation: Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. Recite, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not. I welcome all the participants to this national webinar on research advances in graph theory. To welcome is to honor. I request the head of the department forenoon session, Madam Sabira Parveen, to deliver the welcome address. Over to Sabira, ma'am.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Meaning peace and blessings of the Almighty be showered upon all of us, and a very good morning to one and all. First and foremost, I thank the Almighty for His grace and mercy on all of us during this tough time of COVID-19. I extend a warm welcome to all the participants of this national webinar on research advances in graph theory. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our guest of honor, Dr. Aparna Lakshmanan, Assistant Professor, St. Xavier's College for Women, Aluva, Kerala. Dr. Aparna has graduated from St. Joseph's College and has secured first rank in MSc Mathematics in the year 2002. She has cleared CSIR UGC NET JRF during the year 2003 and has acquired her doctoral degree from Cochin University of Science and Technology in 2009. Under her eminent guidance, 2 research scholars have submitted their thesis and 4 are pursuing their research. Dr. Aparna is a recipient of several awards, which includes the prestigious Kerala State Young Scientist Award 2012. She holds numerous life membership in various professional organizations and mathematical society. Her work has been published in 18 journals, 1 at the national level and 17 at the international level. She has been the resource person for webinars and international conferences. We are privileged to have you in our midst today. May I now request you to share your views on research advances in graph theory. I wish all the participants to participate enthusiastically and benefit from this national webinar. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you for the nice introduction. I also thank the faculty and management of Justice Bashir Ahmad Said College for Women, Chennai for hosting this webinar. Since we are already late, let me directly start with my presentation. Yes. Okay. So the topic for today's session is research advances in graph theory. Actually, graph theory is a very vast branch in which an enormous amount of research is going on. So in 40 minutes, it will be tough to cover all the areas, but I have selected a few of the areas in which I also have done some contributions. So the areas selected by me for today's presentation are graph classes, graph operators, graph parameters, graph labelings, graph algorithms, and some applied graph theory. So let me begin with graph classes. Graph classes is one of my favorite areas since my PhD thesis is in graph classes. It's entitled Studies on Some Graph Classes. So this is one of my favorite areas. So what is a graph class? A graph class is a sub-collection of graphs having some specific properties. Participants, please mute your mic. Host, please let all participants have muted their mic.
Ma'am, Aparna ma'am, please mute and unmute yourself, ma'am. Aparna ma'am. Aparna ma'am.
Sarah ma'am, you can mute the participants.
I have muted, ma'am. Aparna ma'am should unmute herself. Aparna ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I have unmuted.
Yes.
It takes time. It takes some time. I have started sharing, so
I'll just mute all. You yourself unmute yourself, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Right step.
okay. Okay. Yeah. So I have unmuted myself. It takes a few seconds. That is why.
Yes.
So a graph class, while defining a graph class, the universal set under consideration is the collection of all graphs. And from that, we are taking a sub-collection having some specific properties. Such collections are called graph classes. So why it is interesting? Just 1 second. We need to go back to PPT. Yeah. Why it is interesting to have graph classes? The one thing is that the property itself is interesting due to that particular property which we want to apply at some points. The definition is interesting. And at some places, we are introducing graph classes so that the conjectures which are in general tough can be proved in this sub-collection. So that is also a motivation to define new classes of graphs. And even the collection of all graphs which satisfies a particular conjecture or satisfies a particular property forms a new graph class. And this collection of graph classes can also be applied in some realization problems. One of the interesting problems in graph classes is the characterization problem. Let me just explain what we mean by that. And before that, I will show you some examples of graph classes for a better understanding. Maybe a class which is known to all those who are doing research in graph theory is trees. As you all know, trees are all graphs with two properties. That is, the graph need to be connected and the graph need to be acyclic. So the properties under consideration are connectedness and acyclic. And we take a sub-collection which satisfies both these conditions, and that sub-collection is what we call as trees. So trees is a graph class. Similarly, we have bipartite graphs. Again, that is a very familiar concept. The graphs having the property that the vertex set can be partitioned into two, say x and y, such that every edge is having one end vertex in x and the other in y. Such graphs are called bipartite graphs, and that forms a graph class. Again, it can have a sub-collection. A complete bipartite graphs is a subclass of this particular graph class. Complete bipartite means every vertex in x is made adjacent to every vertex in y. Then another thing is connected graphs. As you know, a graph is connected if there exists a path between any two vertices. There is a connection between any two vertices. So if we are taking all such graphs, that forms a class, and that class is called the class of all connected graphs. Then comes planar graphs, a very famous class of graphs. Planar graphs, the property you know, if a graph has a planar embedding, that is, we can someone is trying to zoom my slide. If you try to do that, some scratches will appear in the screen. To zoom, you have to double click on your slide. Don't try expanding with your fingers. Double click on your screen and it will expand. Otherwise, it will create scratches on the screen, which is viewed by all others. I hope you understand. Okay. So, planar graphs. If a graph has a plane embedding, by a plane embedding, we mean that we need to draw all the edges in such a way that no two edges intersect at a point other than the vertex. If such representation is accepted by a graph, such graph forms a class called planar graphs. Then we have chordal graphs. These are graphs in which every cycle of length greater than 4 has a chord. So there are no induced cycles of length greater than 5. That forms the class of chordal graphs. Then we have perfect graphs. Perfect graphs are related to graph parameters, which is again an area of research in graph theory. If for a graph, the chromatic number is equal to its click size and this property is satisfied by all the induced subgraphs also, then such graphs are called perfect graphs. A lot of research is going on in the class of perfect graphs. Then we have intersection graphs. Intersection graphs can be defined from any other branch also. Here, the vertices will be a collection of objects and two vertices will be made adjacent if the corresponding objects intersect. So this is used in the branch of topological graph theory also, the definition of intersection graphs. So from a topology, we can create a graph. And that creation depends upon the concept of intersection graphs. Then we have unicyclic graphs. Unicyclic graphs means a graph in which there exists exactly only one induced cycle. They can be obtained from the class of trees by just drawing one more edge. Take a tree and make any two vertices adjacent. What you get is a unicyclic graph. And we have complement reducible graphs, or in short, they are called cographs. This class is not that familiar to all, so let me explain a bit. These are graphs which satisfies this particular property. That is, when we take complements within components, the graph reduces to a collection of isolated points. What do you mean by taking complement within components? Repeatedly taking complements within components. Say you have C4. You are starting with the graph C4. The complement of C4 gives two edges, right? We are having 2K2 as the complement of C4. If we just take complement, we know that the G complement gives back G. So that is not what is required here. C4, we have taken complement. There are two components. First component is a single edge, a K2, and the second component is again a single edge, another K2. So now we are going to take complements within components. That is, take the first copy of K2, take its complement. What we get is two isolated vertices. Again, there is another copy of K2, take complement within that component. What we get is again two isolated vertices. So starting from C4, taking complements within components repeatedly, we have reached isolated vertices. So C4 is a cograph or a complement reducible graph. So that is the concept of complement reducible graphs. That is an important class of graphs in which a lot of research work is going on. Another one is distance hereditary graphs. Again, that is not a very common definition, so I will elaborate on that concept. A graph G is distance hereditary if take any induced subgraph. Within a connected component, if the distance between any two vertices in that induced subgraph is same as the distance between these two vertices in the original graph, and this holds good for every induced subgraph, then we say that the graph G is distance hereditary. So that is the technical definition. That is, the graph is distance preserving for every connected induced subgraph. I will explain a bit more. Say we start with the graph C5. The vertices are V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, and V5 connected back to V1. So we are having a cycle V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V1. Now, what will be the distance between the vertices V1 and V4? In the original graph G, there are two paths. To move from V1 to V4, either you can start from V1, go to V2, V3, and then V4. There the distance is 3. But we have another path. We can start from V1, move to V5, and then move to V4. So that is the shortest path. So in and there is no change in the distance between these vertices from the original graph and to the induced subgraph. So C4 is distance hereditary, whereas C5 is not distance hereditary. So that is again a graph class. So these are only a few classes of graphs which I have explained. And one interesting area is to study the relation between the graph classes. Say here, the first class taken was a tree. The second class is bipartite graphs. All of us know that every tree is a bipartite graph. So the class of trees forms a subclass of bipartite graphs. Understand? Now, consider unicyclic graphs. A unicyclic graph is never a tree. A tree is never a unicyclic graph. So these two classes are disjoint classes, subclasses of the bigger class. Okay. So trees and unicyclic graphs are disjoint, where trees forms a subclass of bipartite graphs. Again, there is a possibility that there are intersections. There are some common elements, but none of the class is a subclass of others. Such possibilities are also there. For example, say if you take connected graphs and planar graphs, every connected graph need not be planar. Say a subclass of planar graphs, and every planar graph need not be connected. You take two disjoint copies of K2, it is planar. You can have a plane embedding, but it is not connected. Okay. So connected graphs do not form a subclass of planar graphs, and planar graphs do not form a subclass of connected graph. But they do have intersection. If you take K4, K4 is a planar graph, K4 is also connected. So such relations can also be there between the graph classes. So here I have given a diagram showing the relation between a set of graph classes. Again, not all the graph classes are not listed there. I have listed only those classes which has a a graph class which is contained in another. Such property I have utilized. You can notice that this is again a graph. Every vertex, every graph class forms a vertex, and two vertices I have made adjacent to each other if one graph class is a subset of the subclass of the other. So in that way, I have drawn a graph to represent various graph classes. So if anyone is interested in the concept of graph theory, graph classes, a very good reference will be the book Graph Classes, a survey by Andrew Branstad et al. In that book, there are almost 200 classes of various classes of graphs, major results on each of these graph classes, some relation between these graph classes, and of course, some hints towards open problems existing in the area of graph classes. So this will be a very good reference for those who want to do research in graph classes, in the area of graph classes. Okay. Now, here are some, so my slides are not now visible to me. Again, some characterization problems regarding graph classes. I have mentioned that characterization problem is an interesting concept for graph classes. One way of characterizing graphs is through forbidden subgraph characterization. So what do you mean by forbidden subgraph? A particular graph is said to be forbidden for a given graph class if G belongs to that graph class, means G cannot have this particular graph as an induced subgraph. So for example, we have defined cographs, graphs which are complement reducible, and there is a forbidden subgraph characterization for the class of cographs. That is, cographs are precisely P4 free graphs. That is, graphs which do not contain P4 as an induced subgraph. It is not necessary that every graph class admits a forbidden subgraph characterization. Say you are taking the class of all trees. We can't use forbidden subgraph characterization in the case of trees. One may think that why not we forbid all cycles? Yes, for sure, cycles are all forbidden for trees, but that does not give a forbidden subgraph characterization. That is, there is no cycle simply does not mean that the graph under consideration is a tree, because trees need one more additional property. They need connectivity. So the class of all graphs in which cycles are forbidden gives you forest, not trees. So trees cannot be characterized using forbidden subgraph characterization. Again, distance hereditary graph is another important graph class which admits forbidden subgraph characterization. There are 4 forbidden subgraphs. I'm not going into the details. Again, planar graphs, you know, there is forbidden subgraph characterization, K5, K33, and all homeomorphic copies of that. Perfect graphs, they admit forbidden subgraph characterization. Perfect graphs are those in which we do not have any odd holes or odd anti-holes. So those classes can also be characterized using forbidden subgraphs. So once a graph class is introduced, one of the interesting questions is whether that admits a forbidden subgraph characterization. You can either find the forbidden subgraph characterization, or you can prove that it admits a forbidden subgraph characterization, but the question of listing all those forbidden subgraphs is an open question. And you can also prove that this particular class do not have any forbidden subgraph characterization. So research can be done in these 3 directions regarding forbidden subgraph characterization. So another way of doing it is through iterative characterization. Say to generate trees, I can start with an isolated vertex K1 and repeatedly do the operation of attaching a pendant vertex. Using this single operation, I can generate all trees starting from K1. That means trees admit iterative characterization. That is, trees can be defined as graphs which can be obtained from K1 by repeatedly applying the operation of attaching a pendant vertex. So trees admit iterative characterization. Again, the class of cographs and distance hereditary graphs also admit iterative characterization. Cographs can be obtained from K1, starting from K1, and repeatedly using the operations of union and complementation. The interesting fact is that cographs admits another iterative characterization also. So starting from K1, using union and complementation, you can generate all cographs. Again, starting from K1, using the operations of union and join. Join is a new operator. Take 2 graphs and draw all possible edges between the vertex set of these 2 graphs. That gives the join of 2 graphs. So start from K1, repeatedly apply the operations of union and join. What you get is a cograph. So the class of cographs admits iterative characterization in 2 different ways. Again, distance hereditary graphs, you can start from K1. The operations permitted are attaching a pendant vertex, attaching a true twin, and attaching a false twin. You can generate the class of distance hereditary graphs. So that is how we get iterative characterizations for a particular graph. And again, you can look for the structure. From the structure, you can learn. You can give a characterization of a particular graph class. Again, trees admits structural characterization. Cayley graph admits structural characterization. And planar graphs. From the definition itself, you can see that that depends upon the structure of the graph. So these classes admits structural characterization. So these are some ways to characterize an existing class or a newly defined class. Characterization problems are very interesting in the case of graph classes. And graph classes do have applications in other areas also that I will mention while I elaborate on each of those research areas. So another area which I mentioned was that of graph operators. So what do you mean by a graph operator? A graph operator is a function defined on the class of all graphs. Here, the universal set of graph classes we are considering. We are defining an operator on the class of all graphs. The image will be again a graph. So such functions are called graph operators. The domain and the range are both collection of graphs. Okay. So when defining a function, the first question is whether it need to be one-one, whether it need to be onto. There is no such restriction. A graph operator need not be one-one. That is, two different graphs can be mapped to the same graph. That is allowed in the case of a graph operator. So the function need not be one-one. Again, the function need not be onto. That is, every graph need not be the image of some graph. That is also permitted. So graph operator need not be one-one. It need not be onto also. And how the graph operator is related to graph class. Once you apply an operator, you get a range set, right? Applying any function, we have the range set. The collection of all points in that range, in that image set, that is the range, forms a graph class. So every graph operator induces a graph class. For those who are interested in doing research in graph operators, a very good reference will be the textbook Graph Dynamics by Eric Fresner, published in 1995 by Lohmann. In that, hundreds of graph operators are defined, discussed, major results in those direction are given, and a list of open problems are also given. Please note that the textbook is published in 1995. So many of the open problems are settled. So before starting your research, by taking a problem from the text, please make sure that that has not been already settled. Many of the problems are settled, but many more are still open. So for research, for those who are doing research in graph operators, this will be a very good starting reference. So I'll explain a bit on some of the graph operators. The first one, in fact, the one which gave rise to a branch called graph operators is the very famous line graphs. So what is a line graph? Line graph operator is denoted by the letter L, and line graph of a graph G we denote by L of G. You need to start from a graph. The edges of G corresponds to the vertices of L of G. So the edges here gives the vertices of the new graph. And two vertices are adjacent in the new graph if the corresponding edges are incident on the original graph. So the resultant graph is called the line graph of the graph G. This is an operator. We are starting from a graph, and from that, applying the operator line graph, we are getting a new graph. So this is an example of a graph operator. This name, the name line graph, was first used by Harari and Norman. Before that, many research papers were published on line graph under various names. Each of them introduced the concept of line graph in the same way, but with a different name, not knowing that someone else has also done that. So derived graph. We are deriving a graph from the original graph. So that person gave the name derived graph for line graphs. The derivation is done from the edges of the original graph. So another person named it as edge graph. Interchange graph. Here the vertices are interchanged as edges. So the name interchange graph. And edges are changed to vertices. So the name edge to vertex dual graph. So the same class, line graph, is known under different names. These are a few of them. Again, many have done with many different names for the same class, same operator, line graph. And one of the major results in the case of line graph operator is, I have already mentioned that a graph operator need not be 1-1, a graph operator need not be onto. But once an operator is defined, the very first question is whether it is 1-1, whether it is onto. So these questions are always interesting. In the case of line graphs, this problem has already been settled. There are only two graphs, K3 and K13, for which the line graph is isomorphic. For all other graphs, if the graphs are non-isomorphic, the line graphs are also non-isomorphic. So this is proved by Whitley in 1932. So if we are, instead of taking the domain as the whole graphs, remove one from the domain, either K3 or K13. Then the operator will be 1-1. Okay, so in general, it is not 1-1, but if you remove one graph from these two, from the domain, the operator becomes 1-1. The next question is whether the graph operator is onto. This problem is again settled for the class of line graphs. Line graphs is not onto. In fact, the class admits a forbidden subgraph characterization. So this result is due to Beinecke, and this is a very famous and very interesting result in graph theory, the proof of which you can find in the very first textbook written by Harari. So these 9 graphs are forbidden for the class of line graphs, and hence the line graph operator is not onto. Now, those who are interested in doing research in line graphs, an option is the textbook Line Graphs and actually, this is not a textbook. This is a chapter of a textbook. Selected Topics in Graph Theory is the name of the book. In that, there is a chapter, Line Graphs and Line Diagrams, edited by Heminger and Beinecke. And in that book, you can see a very good collection of the various names of line graphs, the results proved in line graphs and line diagrams. And please note that the book was published in 1978, and a lot of further research is done in these areas. But this can be a base reference to start with. So here are some of the variations of line graphs, say total graph, Galley graph, anti-Galley graph, triangle graph, complete graph, click graph, path graph, and superline graph. All these graph operators are motivated from the definition of line graph, but regarding how the operation works, there is a difference. I will elaborate not on all of them, say 2 or 3. I will just elaborate. We do have time constraints. The first one is total graph. It is a super graph of line graph denoted by the letter T, total T. The concept was introduced by these two in 1966. Here, the vertex set is the collection of all vertices and the edges. Both forms the vertex set of total graph. The graph G will be there as such, and the graph LG will be there as such. Apart from that, there will be some more edges. A vertex corresponding to an edge will be made adjacent to its end vertices in the original graph. So that gives the total graph of a graph. It is a super graph of the original graph G as well as the line graph L of G. But the properties are entirely different. We have seen that line graphs admit forbidden subgraph characterization. There are 9 forbidden subgraphs for line graphs, but total graphs do not admit forbidden subgraph characterization. That is the basic reason why the total graphs do not admit forbidden subgraph characterization. But remember that the are not total graphs of any graphs, but still they can be present as an induced subgraph in a total graph. So admitting a forbidden subgraph characterization and the map being onto are different. One-way connection is there. If there is a forbidden subgraph characterization, we can be sure that the operator is not onto, but not vice versa. A contradiction to the vice versa is the a counterexample is the class of total graphs. Now, a very famous theorem on line graphs is due to Wissings. It says that the chromatic number of a line graph is either delta or delta plus 1. The proof is really interesting. A similar analog will be definitely thought for the operator total graph. But the interesting fact is that the problem is still open. We have a conjecture that the chromatic number of total graph is either delta plus 1 or delta plus 2, but the problem is still open. So if you can prove that it is either delta plus 1 or delta plus 2, you can go and publish a research paper which will be widely accepted and appreciated by the community. So this is just one result, a result in line graph trying to be extended to the class of total graphs. There are a lot of similar problems. Any result on line graph, you can attempt for total graphs. Either you can prove that, or you will get a slight variation of that, or you can disprove and you can say that such a result does not hold for total graphs. So there are possibilities of research in all those directions. The next operator which I mentioned was Galilei graphs. Here the vertex set is same as that of the line graphs. That is, edges of the original graph G forms the vertices of Galilei graph. Here 2 vertices are made adjacent if the corresponding edges are incident but do not lie on a triangle. So that is the difference. So every edge in line graph will not be present in Galilei graph. Here there is an additional restriction that these 2 edges must be incident and they should not lie on a triangle. The next one is anti-Galilei graph, which is just a complement of this. That is, the vertex set is again same and 2 vertices are made adjacent if they are incident and spans a triangle. Spans a triangle definitely means that they are incident. So they are made adjacent if they lie on a triangle. Okay, so you can see that the Galilei graph together with anti-Galilei graphs, the union of these 2 forms the line graph. If you have thought like that, you are true. Yes, the answer is yes. The union of Galilei and anti-Galilei graphs gives the line graph, but their behavior is totally different. You can see that line graphs admits forbidden subgraph characterization, but Galilei graphs do not admit forbidden subgraph characterization. Given any graph G, consider G complement joint K1 and take its Galilei graph. You can see that G is an induced subgraph of that. So they do not admit forbidden subgraph characterization. A similar thing holds for anti-Galilei graphs also. Here the graph which we take will be G joint K1 and find the anti-Galilei graph. G will be an induced subgraph. So these 2 are subsets of line graphs in some sense, but the properties are totally different. And again, for line graphs, we have seen that only K3 and K13, that is the only pair which have the same line graph. But this result is also not true for Galley and anti-Galley graph. That is, we can find infinitely many pairs of graphs for which the Galley graph is isomorphic. Again, so the property is entirely different. So here are some open problems which you can admit, which you can try in the case of graph operators. Characterize non-isomorphic graphs of some order having isomorphic Galley graphs. Here I have used the term Galley graph. The same thing can be done for any operator. Okay. Then characterize non-isomorphic graphs of same order having isomorphic anti-Galley graphs. And there is another question regarding commutativity of operators. We say that two numbers A and B commute if AB equal to BA. A similar thing can be extended to functions. We can say that two functions commute if F composition G is same as G composition F. Anything which applies to a function can be extended to the concept of graph operators because graph operator is a function. So what about the commutativity of graph operators? I take Galley graph of a graph and then find its anti-Galley graph. That is del composition gamma. Now I take anti-Galley graph first and then find its Galley graph. That is gamma composition delta. Will they be equal? In general, they are not equal. So characterize graphs for which such equality holds is an interesting problem. In fact, one of my research scholars, G. Pamol, J. Palathingal, had worked in an area related to commutativity, and there is a paper, Commutativity of Graph Operators. In that paper, we have studied the commutativity of line graph with 10 other graph operators. Either we have proved that it commutes, or we have identified the class in which the commutativity property holds. So that is an interesting area of research. And take any two operator, this question arises. So there are plenty of open questions in this regard. That is study of commutativity of any two graph operators. And another interesting question is to characterize graphs for which two operators are gives the same result. Here I have posted the question as graph G for which gamma of G is isomorphic to delta of G. So if you are taking line graphs and Galley graphs, the graph under consideration is a tree. So there are no triangles, right? Or I take the class of all triangle-free graphs. There are no triangles. So the adjacencies in line graph will be exactly the same as the adjacency in the Galley graph. So in the class of all triangle-free graphs, L of G is isomorphic to gamma of G, but not outside that class. So such problems are also interesting. You can take any two operators and study at what points, at what graph classes these two operators gives the same result and where they give a different result. Please note that here again that the concept of graph classes comes into picture. We are applying operator on a particular graph class. I am taking trees and applying line graph operator. I am taking trees and applying Galley graph operators, and I have obtained the same set. So here we are using graph operators as well as graph classes to do the research work. So they are very much interconnected. So that is all for graph operators. You might have noticed that the reference which I gave was not titled as graph operators. It was titled as graph dynamics, because a major area of research in the case of graph operators is its dynamic behavior. So what do you mean by dynamic behavior? That is related to say whether the operator is convergent, whether it is divergent, periodicity, fixedness, nullity, many things are there. What is dynamics? I am starting from a base graph G and applying the same graph operator repeatedly. That is, when I apply the operation of line graph, I get L of G. In L of G, I am again finding the line graph. I am finding the line graph of L of G. That gives me L square G. Again, I am having a graph L square G. Apply the operator line graph for that graph. That gives me L cube G. Iteratively do this. Once you reach L raised to n minus 1 of G, you can apply L to get L raised to n of G. So this gives me a sequence. From graph operators, now we have moved on to sequences. Once you have a sequence, you can study convergence. So from an operator, you get a sequence. If that sequence is convergent, we say that this particular operator is convergent for that particular graph. Instead of taking a single graph, if you are taking a graph class and studying its convergence, we can say that that particular graph class is convergent under this operator. Or if that sequence is diverging, we can say that that graph class is divergent. And now, even though it is convergent, it is not necessary that the terms are finitely many. So periodicity comes into picture there. That is, I'm starting from any graph. I found, say, phi of G. Then I found phi square of G, phi cube of G, phi raised to 4G. When I found phi raised to 5G, I got that it is same as phi square G. So from that stage onwards, participants, please keep your mic muted. Okay. From that stage onwards, if you repeatedly apply the operator, what you are going to get is these three graphs again and again. On phi square, when I apply phi, I get phi cube, phi raised to 4, phi raised to 5. Again, I come back to phi square like that. If such a thing happens, we say that that particular graph operator is periodic. And fixedness. Regarding fixedness, if you find line graph of a cycle, what you get is that cycle itself. That is, L of Cn is equal to Cn. If such a thing happens, we say that the operator is fixed for that particular graph. So that is regarding the fixedness. And when you repeatedly apply an operator, if you reach an empty graph, say for example, I am finding the line graph of path. So I am starting from P4. For P4, there are 3 edges. These 3 edges becomes vertices of the line graph. And when I try for adjacency, I can see that the resultant graph is P3. So line graph of P4 is P3. Again, I am finding the line graph of that. The line graph of P3 will be P2. Again, apply the operator, I will get P2. Again, apply the operator, what I get is P1 or a single vertex. And if I apply the line graph operator on that, since there are no edges, we reach a vacuum stage. If such a thing happens, we say that there is a nullity for that operator for this particular graph. So, such properties are discussed in the textbook on graph dynamics. From that, definitely you can get the definition of graph operators and work on some other area related to graph operator. The main focus of that text is the dynamic behavior of the graph operators. So that is all for the area graph operators. Another area which I mentioned was that of graph parameters. Graph parameters is again a function defined on the class of all graphs. What makes it different from graph operators is that for graph operators, the codomain or the range was again the collection of all graphs. Here, the range set will be the collection of all real numbers. In most of the cases, the range set will be the set of all natural numbers or that of whole numbers. Real numbers is a rare case, but there are. That is why I have given the range as R, given the codomain as R. It's not necessary that the function is 1, 1 or onto, as in the case of graph operators. If I give examples, the concept will be more clear for you. These are all graph operators. You have all seen this, but never thought of it as a graph operator. That is why. Given any graph, you know how to find the chromatic number. Chromatic number means color the vertices with minimum possible number of colors. So the cardinality of minimum possible number of colors gives the chromatic number. So this is an example of a graph parameter. A graph parameter means given a graph G, we can find the value of that parameter for this particular graph. That makes it much more simpler. So chromatic number is a well-known parameter, and radius of a graph. Given a graph, we can find the eccentricities of all the vertices. Eccentricities means maximum distance of any vertex from this particular vertex, and the minimum of all those eccentricities gives the radius, and the maximum gives the diameter. So given any graph G, we can find its radius, we can find its diameter. So these are all graph parameters. Connectivity is another concept, that is the minimum number of vertices whose deletion disconnects the graph, that gives the connectivity of a graph. Independence number, that is take a collection of vertices, no two of which are adjacent to each other, make it maximum possible. The cardinality of such a maximum possible set gives the independence number, that is again a parameter. Matching number is related to choosing independent edges. Then energy of a graph. Energy of a graph, I will elaborate a bit. Energy of a graph is a different branch. In fact, that is a graph parameter. How we can call it a graph parameter? Given any graph G, we can find the energy of that graph. So energy of a graph is a graph parameter. Why it is? Why I have given it in red means this is a growing area in research. Finding energy of a graph, finding distance energy of a graph, even the finding the eigenvalues are interesting. This is related to algebraic graph theory, another branch of research related to graph theory. Given a graph G, we can find its adjacency matrix, then find its eigenvalue, take the modulus and add them. What you get is the energy of a graph. So it is a graph parameter, but we cannot say that it is restricted, that area is restricted to the researches going on in the class of graph parameters, but it is a different branch. It is a fast growing branch. Participants, please mute your mic. Participants, please mute your mic. Thank you. So energy of a graph is a fast growing branch where there is say plenty of opening for research. And again, domination number. That is also a wide growing branch of research. Domination number, I will expand a bit. And there are many variations of domination number also in which research is going on. Again, click number, click transversal number, click independence number, and many more. There are a lot of graph parameters in which a lot of research is going on. So I will just give two famous conjectures related to graph parameters. For that, I need to expand the definition of some of this. The first one is domination number. Most of you will be familiar with the concept, but in case someone doesn't know, I am just giving the definition. A set S subset of V is called a dominating set if every vertex of G is either in S or is adjacent to a vertex in S. A set is called minimal dominating if none of its proper subsets are dominating, and the domination number is the minimum possible cardinality of a dominating set. So that is a parameter. I need another definition also, that is regarding the Cartesian product of graphs. Take two graphs G and H having V1 E1 and V2 E2 as the vertex and edge sets. The vertex set of the Cartesian product will be the ordered pairs of the form V1 V2, where V1 comes from the vertex set of G and V2 is from the vertex set of H. And any two vertices are made adjacent if any of these conditions is satisfied. That is either V1 equal to V1 dash and V2 is adjacent to V2 dash, or V1 is adjacent to V1 is adjacent to V1 dash and V2 is equal to V2 dash. Here is how we draw the Cartesian product. The graphs under consideration is a triangle and an edge. The Cartesian product will look like this. Here you have one more example. This is my graph G and this is my graph H. This is how the Cartesian product will look like. If you have a close-up look, you can see that this particular graph, there are 4 copies. This is one copy, this is another copy, this is a third copy, and there is a fourth copy. So there are 4 copies of the first graph H, and there are 5 copies placed horizontally of the graph of the second graph H. So that is a way in which you can easily understand the concept of Cartesian product. And there is a very famous conjecture called Wissing's conjecture. The conjecture states that the domination number of Cartesian product of G and H is greater than or equal to the product of domination numbers of G and H. That is, gamma of G box H is greater than or equal to gamma of G into gamma of H. This conjecture is open since 1968. So we have passed the golden jubilee in 2018 and is still open. Here again, graph classes plays a role. For some of the graph classes, the conjecture is settled. When some problem is difficult, that is, we are not able to settle the problem in general, we look for graph classes. We take a graph class, study this particular problem in that graph class, and see to it that whether that particular graph class satisfies this conjecture. In that way also we can attack open problems. So this is an area where graph classes also comes into picture, and the concept is interesting. Okay, so for many graph classes, this particular conjecture has been settled, but in general it is open. So to state another open problem in graph operators, I need 2 more definitions. The first one is triangle independence number. It is the maximum number of edged disjoint triangles in a given graph. Say, I am considering this particular graph. You can see that there are 3 red triangles and there are 3 green triangles. And these triangles do not share any edge in common. Please note that there are vertices in common, which is allowed, but there are no edges in common. So as you can see, there are 6 edge disjoint triangles, and it is a simple exercise to see that this is going to be the maximum possible. So for this particular graph, the triangle independence number is 6. Another thing is the triangle transversal number. The triangle transversal number is the minimum cardinality of an edge set, which means all triangles of a graph. I am taking the same example, the same graph. I have colored some of the edges as blue. You take any triangle from this graph, you can see that at least one edge is blue. That means the set of all blue edges covers all triangles. You take any triangle, at least one edge is blue. So the minimum cardinality of such a set gives me the triangle transversal number. And here in this case, this is the minimum possible, and the triangle transversal number is 7 for this graph. Why I have defined these 2 parameters? Because there is a conjecture relating these 2 graph parameters. The conjecture is posed by Touza and is known as Touza's conjecture. These are the 2 graph parameters, the maximum number of edge disjoint triangles and the minimum cardinality of an edge set which meets all triangles. The conjecture states that tau delta is always less than or equal to 2 times nu delta. This was posed by Touza in 1981, and you can see that it's almost 40 years since the conjecture is stated. The problem is still open. A settlement or disproving really means a great contribution towards the research in graph theory. Again, graph classes plays a role here. The conjecture is not settled in general, but it has been proved for many special classes of graphs. So that's all for graph parameters. The next concept which I had mentioned was graph labeling. Labeling a graph means assigning integer values. Assigning integer values where? That is a question. If you are assigning integer values to vertices, such labelings are called vertex labelings. If you are assigning values to edges, such labels are called edge labelings. And if you want to assign values to both vertices and edges, such labelings are called total labelings. Here I have listed very few of the existing graph labeling definitions. The most famous and the first one was graceful labeling. I will elaborate a bit on the definition of graceful labeling. And there are related labelings like edge graceful labeling, harmonious labeling, and now graph coloring. Graph coloring is again a labeling. Graph coloring means we are giving colors either to vertices or to edges or to both. Instead of using the term color, if you are giving number, instead of saying green, red, blue, yellow, if you are saying 1, 2, 3, 4, it becomes a label. So every graph coloring gives rise to a graph labeling. So that forms a subclass. And I will elaborate a bit on leech labeling also. So the first thing was graceful labeling. Here the assignment is given to vertices. You have to label the vertices in such a way that they induce an edge label in a particular manner. If two vertices are labeled, say here you can see that these vertices are labeled 5 and 4. So this labeling induces a labeling for the edge as the difference between the vertex labels of its end vertices. So 5 minus 4, 1 will be the edge label of this edge. So here I have to assign labels to vertices in such a way that the corresponding edge labels will be exactly 1, 2, etc. m, where m is the number of edges. In this example, you can see that I have labeled vertices and the induced edge labels are also mentioned. So 5 minus 4 gives me 1, 3 minus 2 gives me 2, 0 minus 3, the modulus of which gives me 3, 4 minus 0 gives me 4, and 5 minus 0 gives me 5. There are 5 edges and the induced edge labeling is exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a graceful labeling. It is not true that every graph admits a graceful labeling. So that is a major area of research. Identify graphs which admits graceful labeling. And there is a very famous conjecture due to Rosa, that is all trees are graceful. Rosa believes that every tree is graceful, but the proof is open. Again, for many subclasses of trees, say the collection of all paths forms a subclass of the collection of all of the class of all trees. For the case of paths, the conjecture is settled, but in general, the conjecture is still open. So that is an interesting open problem. Are all trees graceful? So that was graceful labeling. Another thing which I told was leech labeling. This leech labeling is defined only for the class of all trees, not for all graphs. This is defined only for trees. What is interesting about trees is that between any two vertices, there will be a unique path. So if there are n vertices, there will be precisely NC2 paths. Okay. So here I am giving labels to edges in such a way that the path weights are exactly 1, 2, etc. NC2. Since there are n vertices, there will be NC2 paths. And by a path weight, I mean the sum of edge labels assigned to the edges of that particular path. So I have to assign distinct positive integer edge weights in such a way that the path weights are exactly 1, 2, etc. NC2. Then that labeling is called a leech labeling, and such graphs, such trees, we call as leech trees. So if a leech labeling exists, we call it a leech tree. Here you have an example. This is a path on 4 vertices. I have given edge labels as 1, 3, and 2. Since there are 4 vertices, there will be 4C2. That is 4 into 3 by 2. That is 6 paths. There will be 6 paths. So the path weights must be exactly 1, 2, etc. 6. Let us check. you can see that V1, V2 is a path, and the weight of this path is 2 itself. Now, V3, V4 is a path, and the path weight is 2. V2, V3 is a path, and the path weight is 3. So 1, 2, 3 is okay. Now, look for the path V1, V3. There are two edges labeled 1 and 3. So the path weight will be 1 plus 3, that is 4. Now, look for the path V2, V4. There are two edges labeled 3 and 2. So the path weight will be 3 plus 2, that is 5. And now consider the whole path V1, V4. The edges are labeled 1, 3 and 2. So the path weight will be 1 plus 3 plus 2, which is 6. So here the path weights are exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So this is a leech tree, and this particular labeling gives the leech labeling of the path on 4 vertices. In fact, the concept was introduced by John Leech in a paper, Another Tree Labeling Problem, published in American Mathematics Monthly in the year 1975. In that paper, John Leech just introduced this labeling. The name was not given by him, but later when other researchers started working on this particular labeling, since the concept was introduced by John Leech, the name Leech labeling came to existence. As of date, only 5 leech trees has been identified, and it is an open problem whether there exist more leech trees. I'll just show you the current status. It has been proved that the paths of length greater than 5 are not leech trees, but P1, P2, P3 and P4 are leech trees. For stars K1n, if n greater than 4, then it is not a leech tree. So the problem is settled for stars. Again, for bistars, the problem is settled. And for some special classes of graphs also, this problem has been settled, but not for all. And there are papers relating to the order of a leech tree. It has been proved that a tree is a leech tree if and only if the order of the tree, that is the number of vertices in that tree, is either a perfect square or a perfect square plus 2. The proof is really interesting. None of the graph theory tools are used to prove this theorem. The procedure is totally based on algebraic equations. So it comes under combinatorics. No graph theory techniques has been used. So that is what makes research interesting. You are proving a result in graph theory without using any graph theory tools. Such things must happen. That makes mathematics universal. Okay. So here is the list of classes for which the conjecture has been settled. I repeat: path, cycle, path, stars, bistars, tristars. The problem has been settled. Since we are running out of time, I think I will conclude now. 2 more areas I just mentioned. One was graph algorithms. Graph algorithms is regarding the complexity of identifying a particular graph class or studying a particular problem. It has been classified as P and NP. Does there exist a polynomial time algorithm, or whether it is a non-deterministic polynomial algorithm? Depending on that, we say that the problem is either P or NP. Whether P coincides with NP is also an open question. So if you are an expert in computer science, for any of the labeling problem or any dynamics problem in operators, you can try to write algorithms and establish how complex these algorithms are. So that is also an area in which plenty of research is going on. Another area is applied graph theory. One of the major applications is in social networks. What is a social network? Say all of you will be definitely will be having Facebook accounts. Almost all are having Facebook accounts. A Facebook account is an example of a social network. Every individual will be a vertex. Every group inside the Facebook network will also be a vertex. And 2 vertices will be made adjacent if either These, if they are people, if they are friends, we make these, what is this, adjacent. If a person is a member of a particular group, there will be adjacency between that person and that group. Like that, we can create a graph realization of the Facebook. In fact, it is a dynamic graph. That is, in every second, a new Facebook account or a new Facebook group will be created, not many. So the vertex set and the edge set of this graph is dynamically growing. Again, there is a chance that at a point a person was a member of a group. After some time, he felt that I don't want to continue as a member here, so he will leave that group. So what happens in our graph? An edge will be deleted from our graph. So this is an example of a dynamic graph. So that is an area of research in applied graph theory. So I think I have already run out of time. So thank you for your patient hearing, and the forum is open for discussion. I am ready to take your questions. So I'm stopping screen sharing now.
Thank you for the wonderful and beneficial presentation, ma'am. Dear participants, we now have a question answer session. Please feel free to post your questions using only the chat box.
Ma'am, when will you post the feedback link here?
Feedback will be sent to your mail ID, sir. Now this is a question answer session. Please post your questions into the chat box only.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
There is a question from Anne Verghese to explain P and NP problems. It's not easy to explain P and NP problems in say 5 to 10 minutes. It's a fast growing area of research. The only thing is that there is a misconception that NP means non-polynomial. It's not like that. NP is again polynomial, but it is non-deterministic polynomial. So that is the difference between P and NP. And is P equal to NP? That is an open question. There are plenty of research papers in that direction also. You need not be an expert in polynomial algorithms to say whether a particular parameter is P or NP. Determining a particular parameter is P or NP. There are a collection of problems which has already been proved as either P or as NP. If you can prove that your problem is equally tough of doing one of that problems, in that way also you can say that your problem is NP. So it's difficult to explain it in 5 to 10 minutes. Some open problems in energy of graphs. In fact, in energy of graphs, there are a lot many problems which to point out. Say eigenvalue, finding the eigenvalues of graphs, which values can be the energy of a graph is an open problem, and expansions of that in the direction of distance energy. For energy of a graph, we are considering the adjacency metrics. Based on incidence metrics and based on distance metrics also, there are similar questions. So any problem on energy of a graph can be extended to a problem on distance energy and can be exploited.
There are a few more
Whether
questions.
complexity problems in graph operations is studied? Yes. Yes, there are problems on complexity problems of graph operators. Finding finding the dynamic nature of many problems. Many operators are NP complete. So the questions are scrolling up. I am not sure whether I missed some of them.
Yeah, there is a question now, ma'am.
Yes, please.
I'll just read it.
Is there any real world application for eccentric domination? That I don't know. I'm not familiar with the concept of eccentric domination. There are at least 1,000 domination parameters. I haven't read all those, so I don't know. Any other questions? Yeah, sure. The video content, once the organizers share with me, I will upload in my YouTube channel and share the link to all the registered participants. Finding graphs for which P of G equal to K, where P is a parameter, comes under which type of characterization? So this comes under the study of graph parameters. So regarding energy, I pointed out the same thing. Energy of a graph. Does there exist a graph having a particular integer value as its energy, particular positive integer value as its energy? It's an interesting question. Similar questions can be asked for any of the parameters. Say for chromatic number, we say that does there exist a graph having chromatic number A, where A is any particular positive integer? The answer is yes. Take K, the chromatic number will be A. So that is too simple. But there are questions like you take a graph G and two numbers A and B. Does there exist a graph G whose chromatic number is A and the chromatic number of one of its induced subgraph is B? So such questions are also there regarding graph parameters. Plenty of research is going on in that direction also. And when you introduce a new parameter by yourself, the first question is definitely this. That is, does exist a graph G for which P of G equal to K for an arbitrary integer K? That is always an interesting question. Yes. Gallet and anti-Gallet commute in any graph class? Yes. There are few, very few graphs for which the Gallet and anti-Gallet graph operator commutes. There are. Say you take, for an example, you take, this is a simple case, take K13 union K3. You find Gallet graph, what you get is a triangle and 3 isolated vertices. You take anti-Gallet graph, again, what you get is 3 isolated vertices and a triangle. So they are isomorphic. Using that, you can get commutativity. To prove, if we don't use graph methods to prove, is it not graph theory problem? Though we choose analysis method. If the question comes from graph theory, definitely it is a graph theory problem. To prove that, you can use any technique. You can use analysis, you can use topology, you can use combinatorics, you can use algebra, whatever you want you can use. But if the base question lies in graph theory, it is a graph theory problem. Can you share the presentation slides? I'll share the entire recording through YouTube link.
I think there are no more questions, ma'am.
Okay, then we can conclude, I believe. I thank, once again, I thank all the organizers and the participants.
Thank you, ma'am. The link of the feedback, dear participants, the link of the feedback form along with the recorded YouTube link will be sent to your personal mail ID with which you have registered. So you can fill the feedback form and the e-certificate will be provided within a 12 days of span. Okay. I now request the head of the department afternoon session, Madam Shaheen, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very pleasant good afternoon.
Alaikum salam.
And a very pleasant good afternoon to everyone. I deemed it a great privilege to propose the vote of thanks for this national webinar. First and foremost, I thank the Almighty Allah for showering His infinite blessings upon all of us and for making this session a grand success. I, on behalf of the staff members, the Department of Mathematics of both forenoon and afternoon session of Justice Bashir Ahmed Syed College for Women, express my sincere gratitude to the management, principal, vice principal for giving us permission to organize this webinar and also for the continuous motivation and support. I place on record our indebtedness to the resource person, Dr. Aparna Lakshmanan, who richly deserves our gratitude, and I offer the same. Ma'am, your presentation on research advances in graph theory was greatly enlightening and motivating. It also provides a platform for the participants to do research in graph theory. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable knowledge with us. I express my sincere thanks to the coordinators, Mrs. Sharmila and Mrs. Azizunisa, for the untiring work in organizing this webinar. I also express my thanks to the staff members for the backup support. I extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Gayatri from MRCC and the IQAC team for providing us an excellent platform to organize this webinar. Finally, I thank all the participants for the enthusiastic participation and kind cooperation. Thank you all. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all once again. I'm leaving the meeting room.